As most of you are aware, there are a lot of things that have gone on in 2020 and 2021 that all of us were not prepared to address as we planned for what our year would be and what that involvement would be. One of the here, these are just a few of the things that we saw that have come in that we have dealt with over the last year, which many of y'all have. So we'll kind of take these different areas and highlight some of those to kind of give you some idea of what we are doing internally within Alabama 811 organization, which will impact some of your operations, and I'm sure some of these things you have experienced as well. One of the things that is always asked for us is what is our locate volume, and that's the number of locate requests that we take. So just to kind of start off with that, you will see if you look at this graph that shows the top line, which is the locate volume comparative from 2018 to year to date, which would be at the end of August for 2021. 2019 was a record year for us. That was the most locate requests we could ever taken in a calendar year, and we were just under 630,000 locate requests for that. 2020, which we'll talk about a little bit more, was a decrease. There were several factors that impacted on that. And some of those factors will impact into 2021 as well. But if you compare what we're doing for 2021 compared to our record year of 2019, we are fairly close to be on track with that year. We'll probably still be under that year a little bit, but when we talk about what other impacts we have had, you will see that the overall activity is continuing to increase in the locate volume around the state. So hopefully after this year moving forward, we can kind of levelize what the call volume trend will be based off of some of the new operation procedures legislated. Of that total locate volume, the blue line that you see is our remote ticket entry. We have, in our remote ticket entry, we have options where people can enter a remote ticket that is completely passed through the system. They are trained and viewed and evaluated to receive that permission to be able to do that. And in that case, they would enter their locate request and it would go straight into the system and straight through our member companies. It doesn't have an interim stop within the call center itself for review. The rest of the tickets do come into an agent in our office to review, and all people who begin using our remote ticket entry are kind of put into that phase so we can monitor the quality of the information that they're including before they're kind of graduated into what we call our tier 3 user. Of the remote ticket entries that you see, about 38% of those are currently unassisted. So right now, our remote ticket entry is ballparking about 60% of our overall call volume. And of that, you can ballpark 40% of that is strictly going through. And that's to kind of help improve on the financial side, because we aren't having to pay the overhead of a staff person to deal with that. And it also allows sometimes in some cases, the person is able to better locate the information on the map to mark and so forth, because they're more familiar with the area. Then you're not doing the old game we all played growing up, where you whispered something in somebody's ear and it continued to pass around and you hear what the last person heard compared to what got started. So it's a direct communication by doing the unassisted from the excavator to the facility owner. And the red line that you will see is the actual telephone calls. Many times you still hear us refer to it as call before you dig, but you'll see that the majority of what we're taking is really the people are contacting the 811 center. It's not a physical telephone call anymore. And those continue to decline. What we are seeing in this is with the calls, a lot of those are first-time callers or people who have more complicated locate requests. So those calls are taking longer to process, and Matt will probably share some of that in the operational side. But as the industry trend and technology continues to come in, you can see the trend in our call volume and ticket volume as well, of how much of that is really being processed through a technology avenue as opposed to a manual telephone call from when the organization initially started. When you look at some of that call volume and some of those changes that we've seen, one of the things that we look at who is calling in, we're seeing an increase in homeowner locate requests. you'll see that there was a big spike in homeowner requests in 2020, and we talked a little bit about this last year as well. And this is not unusual for Alabama. This is a trend that people see across the United States. And a lot of that had to do as a direct result of the pandemic. And as more people were at home, we all saw scenes of, the pandemic, and people were supposed to be staying in their homes, and the home improvement stores parking lots were packed. And so we saw some of that, as well as people did home improvement projects. In addition, there was, a lot of people were hiring people out for different jobs and stuff that came in that they could do as well. As you'll see for 2021, even though things have leveled out some, we are comparative in homeowner tickets from 2019 for year to date of 2021. And we're continuing to see that trend of homeowner tickets. And I'm going to let McKay will talk about that as well, but that is also an area that we've targeted as we've gone through and looked at what some of the trends have been and where we're seeing some of the problems, and talking to our member companies, ensuring that we have that grassroots education program to that homeowner as they are hiring people to do work, that they are aware and educated on the damage prevention, and ensuring that those projects are part of the process. So, so we've kind of targeted that, and McKay will talk about that a little bit as well. And this is just giving the homeowner request in a little different view when you see what their percentages of our overall call volume have been, and you can see that those continue to increase. For 2020, they were about 32% of our overall call volume were tagged as a homeowner or resident, and year to date for 2021, we are right at 34%. So that grassroots of educating that homeowner has continued to improve. And just as a quick look, if you look at over 2018 through September of this year, majority as expected that we see for those residents property owner projects that they're calling in are related to landscape fencing and drainage work, which is not surprising. The other impact that we've had over this last year is some of the stuff that we talked much more in depth about last year, but was relative to legislative change. There was some legislation that was passed in 2019 that impacted the operations of Alabama 811 and the state's damage prevention program. For those that it went into effect for January of last year, was that the notification period was extended to not include the date of notification, which means that if they call in on a Monday, the 2 working day notice starts on the next morning, Tuesday at 7 a.m. And then the other one was the life of a locate request was extended to 20 working days. Prior to that, it was 10 working days. And so now an excavator is able to work on a locate request for an extended period of time than before he has to update and notify the utilities if the work has not been completed. Excuse me. The other one was the process for damage reporting, so that the facility owners are required to report damages annually, so that there can be some statistical analysis looked at and trends to see where the damage program may need to be improved and reinforced in education efforts. And last was the establishment of an authority board for enforcement. So we'll kind of break those down in just a little bit. Beginning in January of this year, we also had some improvements in the membership, and there was some requirements that underground facility owners must participate in the one call center, and it was tiered into effect. January of 2020, if someone was a member, they had to stay a member. As of January 2021, operators that had more than 25,000 customers or 500 miles of underground had to be a member. And then you'll notice for January of 2022, operators with less than 25,000 customers and less than 500 miles of underground are required to be a member. And this will be the bulk of our membership. Also in January of 2021, positive response went into effect as well. To look at membership, which is part of what has been a lot of what we've focused on over this last year, is if you would look at 2019, we started out with 442 members. At the end of 2020, we had 472. There was not 30 members that fell into that first category of over 25,000 customers, but we worked to contact those people who had to be members and to make them aware of it and encourage them to come on sooner than later to try to minimize that big push right there at the end where people were having to come on and ensuring that we could involve them. So far, year to date, we've had 29 new members that have come on as of the end of August, and those meetings continue to be involved. What we have found in a lot of these contacts is there's a lot of utility companies that wanted to be a member, and being able to have that justification to join because of the legislative changes was helpful. I'm going to move this over and give Matt the control of the presentation and let him go into the membership information a little bit more. We have rolled this under the operational side of things, so it's in his area for his staff, and wanted to go ahead and put that through. Hold on, let me see. I think they're transferring it over.
Yeah, hang on just a second. Working on it right now.
Okay.
You can just leave that presentation up because I don't have that presentation. So
Yeah, I think we can just give him the control of the mouse would be fine.
Yeah.
So if Matt, if you want to go ahead and then
yeah. So membership over the past probably 3 years, we've been gearing up for this change once we learned about the law that was coming on with the required membership. And we're not sure how many are out there. We suspect it's in the range of close to our existing member numbers, probably a little less, but that's a lot of members to bring on. And we had revised the process for a while. Do I have control here? Can I?
Yeah, I'm not. It's not cooperating. I'm trying.
That's okay. So we had already started to look at the process. We wanted to streamline it. The existing process was a little bit cumbersome for members. It was a paper form. It was a lot of mailing back and forth, and it usually ended up resulting in a follow-up meeting to explain the process once they joined. And what we started looking at was, do we need, where was some of that? The original thought was that the breakdown was on the notification area. So up until December of last year, we had moved the process into one position that was working on GIS and membership. That was under Gavin. Gavin turned in his notice. He was part of the Great Resignation. A lot of people have probably seen that. And so we started looking at the process, thinking, how can we streamline this a little bit? And some of the pain points were the mailing was the first one. The back and forth on the mapping and the communication between departments here was another one. And so the original thought was, let's have an onboarding meeting. Let's explain the application in the meeting, and then we can coordinate, explain the mapping, and then work through it. Okay, here it is. Great. What we found very quickly, can you go back one, please? Thank you. Is that especially with these new members that are coming on, it takes a lot more than one 30-minute meeting to explain everything that's here. It's a series of conversations, and it was decided last spring probably, to bring on a dedicated member service manager. So Emily Roberts was hired for this process. She has experience with rural water and other members. She's worked for pipelines before. And so she's been working to improve this process. The current process is, if we go to the next one, we have an online membership application. Everybody's encouraged to go here first, fill out all of their information, and as best they can. And once this is completed, Emily follows up and schedules the onboarding meeting and reviews the application. And as part of reviewing the application, goes through and explains all the various requirements, how the notification areas need to be updated, how positive response works, what's expected of members, what's expected of us. And she's continually refining this process as she goes. Every time she completes a new membership, and this is gearing up towards the big rush, she will review that process and continually refine it to try to make it more efficient. We still haven't seen the big rush that we're expecting. She's doing 4 or 5 meetings a week, and there's still hundreds of potential members out there with 2 months left to go. So we're expecting at some point, and we don't know if it's going to be before the new year or after, once everyone's out of compliance, that they'll be rushing in. So we're hopefully getting this process streamlined in. Now if we can jump to the next slide here. And these updates can be simple, and it's hard to find the pain points. One thing that she found was there was a lot of back and forth for paperwork. So after the meeting, she combines everything into one consolidated packet. And something like this, putting the notification area approval, there used to be a separate map, a separate form. That's really surprisingly confusing for people, and it's really not if you think about it. So what she suggested, this was a really simple suggestion, it's made a huge difference. Take the map and put the approval form all on one page and include it with the membership packet. So we send them one packet, they review, make any adjustments, and send back one signed packet. So there's no back and forth beyond that one document. The other thing that has been a big help is having a dedicated membership person allows us to have a defined communication path between GIS and membership. And so Andrew, our GIS specialist, and Emily work together, and usually they can get a service area created and inserted into a packet within about an hour, which is a huge improvement over before. Okay, I think that's it for the membership.
Okay. I'm still having some troubles. I seem to have lost control of my mouse, so we'll just I can advance, but that's about all I can do. So we'll just keep working through this. One of the things that we noted on the operational changes and the legislative changes had to do with as we talked about the beginning of the locate request starting, instead of it being at the time that the notification was given, everything rolls to 7 a.m. on the next business day. So that actually gives the facility owners a true 2 working days to have those facilities marked. And it helped remove some of that confusion as to whether a locate request expired at the end of the physical day or if it expired at the end of the 48 hours from the time it was called in. So this puts everything on the same clock. Everything starts at the same time. Everything expires on the same time. One of the things that we had hoped and to see from this was we continue to have an increase over the last couple of years, and you can look that we were probably having around 12 to 13,000 locate requests that came in, which were noted as second notice. And that second notice was related to if they were there and the facilities could not, had not marked, and they put in a second notice. So what we were hoping to see with, and part of that could have been with the load that was in that area or other things that came on, that it was hard to get through. When you look at, like I said, on the initial information, that we handled 630,000 locate requests in a year, and that's spread out across the state. There are some utility companies that get a very large majority of those locate requests, and trying to get those locate requests marked in 2 days could sometimes be a challenge. especially when you weren't truly having a 2 full days. So what we had hoped to see from that was that there would be a decrease in the total number of second notices, so that the facility owners were able to get to those facilities and market at the same time. What you'll actually see in reality was for 2020, the second notice percentage went up about 8% over the previous year, a little less than we had in 2018. But when you consider the fact that our ticket volume was less, it was probably a greater percentage of that. So that was a little trend that we had hoped not to see that we did. But again, one of the things to consider for 2020 is we had the pandemic that we had to deal with. A lot of utility companies, a lot of contract locators were dealing with staffing issues, being understaffed because employees might be working on crews. One person got sick. They had to quarantine the rest of the crew for 14 days. So there was some of those challenges that we had. Even though we continued to hear, complaints about things maybe not being marked within the time it starts, if you look at year-to-date 2021 compared to 2022, we are actually, at 21% less second notices. So we're hoping to see as things progress forward that trend that we were anticipating to see will continue. So we'll continue to monitor those and track those and see how those numbers come in and impact operations. The other area that was changed, as we mentioned, was the life of the ticket. When you look at the update request for 2019, and an update request is generated when an excavator calls back the life of the ticket has expired. In that case, in 2019, it was 10 working days. And at the 10 working days was over, if they were not completed their work, they were required to update their locate request. And so we had a good number of requests that came in that were strictly updates. So when the life of the ticket extended to 20 days, we expected to see a decrease in those. And you can see we actually saw about a 52% decrease in tickets updated for work continuing. So the excavator has the opportunity to work on a job site longer before they have to update a ticket. And in addition, the facility owners don't have to send as many people out, which hopefully not having to respond to as many update tickets will help on the flip side of what we just discussed and being able to have tickets located in a timely manner on the front end of an excavation. For year-to-date 2021, we're still seeing a downward trend of those updates as well. So that was a lot of why you saw that decrease in the locate volume totally for 2020 was that decrease. But you'll see that even though we decreased update tickets by 52%, our overall call volume was not down by 52%. So what we're seeing is even though those tickets were not involved in the number count, we're continuing to see new excavation and new tickets come in. So if we had not had the change in 2020 that we had with the life of the ticket, we would have seen a pretty significant jump, I think, in 2020 in overall excavation tickets. The other area that we are beginning to really try to look at, both from Alabama 811 and working with the Alabama Damage Prevention Alliance group, and what we're seeing in some of the numbers that came across is where we see some of those late locates and those types of things. A lot of it has to do with some of the large projects that are going on out there and how those locate requests are being called in, the size of those locate requests, what's reasonable for a facility owner and their locators to get marked. And so the Alabama Damage Prevention Alliance, the ADPA, has spent a lot of time this past year trying to look at this issue and what to address. And it's not a very clean-cut issue. There's a lot of moving parts to keep up. And again, this is another area that's not just in Alabama, but other states as well are looking into this and addressing this to try to figure it out. Some states have defined large projects. Some states say a large project is strictly what can be located within the life of the ticket, what can be worked, in the life of the ticket. So, how do you define a large project? Is it the linear footage? If it's over 2,000 feet, is that a large project? Well, 2,000 feet out in a rural area may be very easy to locate. In a area like downtown Birmingham, downtown Montgomery, where you have a lot of congestion, a lot of other facilities, it's not the same time relevance. Another thing we've looked at is the number of projects. So if someone is working in a defined area, they may only have a small area. It may be a small subdivision lots that are being in it. So there's not a lot of the footage in there, but they have multiple locate requests going on in that same area. Or is it, do you look at how long it's going to take to complete the project? If it's going to extend beyond one life of the ticket, the 20 days, does that become a large project? So those are kind of the things that have been talked about and looked at. And for those of you that have attended the summit the last couple of years, we've kind of addressed that there to get some input and feedback from those. And then we also have talked about, whether everything is unique. A large project is a large project. Are there different locate request types that need to become in there? Is there a difference between a large project and a large scope ticket, where a large scope ticket may cover a large area that would need to be marked over a certain amount of time, where a large project may have a bunch of different areas that are being worked at the same time? I can give you one example of some of the challenges is working through that. When you talk about the linear footage, we've had some contractors who've called in locate requests. The linear footage is not large. It may be 500 to 1,000 foot on that particular ticket. But what they've done is they've had so many of those. When you looked at it for the locate request they called in, they were asking for 65,000 feet to be located within 2 days. So that's next to impossible. So that's why when I mentioned, linear footage may not be the perfect answer. It may also have to become in these other parameters. And as we've continued to look at those things, we've talked about if there needs to be a longer notice period. So if something falls within whatever that definition becomes to for a large project, would those require, instead of the 2 working days, for example, the 65,000 feet area, would that roll over to, a week or 4 days or whatever? And is that something that we need to look at? Some states have worked up a program that they have a working agreement. When a locate request is tagged somewhere in that large project mentality, then have a meeting between the facility owners, the locators, and the excavator, and work out a timeline of, this is where I plan to work, this is how I'm planning on working my crews, these are the days I plan to be there, and so that they can all agree that, okay, these areas will be marked on this timeline for you. But then it comes up the question of who's going to be responsible for maintaining that agreement. Is it going to fall back on the facility owner, the excavator, the locator? Who's going to take the lead on that? So there's a lot of moving parts of this discussion. As I said, it's not real clear, but this is something that continues to become an issue in both damage prevention and preventing the potential damage to facilities, as well as ensuring that there's manpower to get these things located along the timelines and the excavator needs, so that they can complete their work and not have downtime. So as I said, it's a very complex discussion, and there's a lot of questions that are still to be answered. If any of y'all are interested and want to help participate in those, just drop me an email and let me know, and we will add you to the task team that's working on that for the ADPA. One of the things that has come from some of these discussions, we've done some pilot programs and some for different areas to try to look for some areas where engineering firm had a job going on that met a lot of different parameters, and what seemed to kind of pan out in that. And what comes up every single time is that communication is the key. If you can come up with a good way to communicate between people, that seems to help on these large projects and keeping them flowing, and no downtime for either the excavator or the facility owner in getting things marked. So one of the things that has come up, as I mentioned in the legislation, was positive response. And the positive response, we've had it as a trial basis for several years, where we have we had our members who voluntarily provided positive response. And what that does is it kind of closes the loop. It allows the facility owner to go back to the excavator to say the facility has been marked, or we do not have facilities there, or if there's some other issue that has to be addressed. But and this is just an example of one that I pulled in. One of the things that you'll notice, because at the time when we first started this, we did not have all the facility owners that wanted to participate on the voluntary basis. So to try to close that loop for the excavator, we have an auto response in there that if they have not responded by a certain time frame, that the ticket will close that locate request out for the positive response side of it. So the facility owners, you'll notice on the second one with Vieira Utilities, they can still go back in and update that information. So if something should change, they can go in. So there's a constant audit trail of what activity and communication. So it doesn't just close it out completely, but it does allow for our system not to have, hundreds of thousands of locate requests sitting out there open, pending something during that time. So it kind of closes that ticket out for that purpose, for that. Since positive response went in, we have majority of our members who are that have been set up so that they've all been contacted and had their people put into the system to close those locate requests out. There's multiple ways that can be done, and if you're interested in it, just contact us. And if you're not using it or not sure if your company is using it, and we can go through that. But one of the things I wanted to note on here is if you look at our overall positive response for the year through August, 84% of our requests are being closed by the facility owned operator. About 16% of those are being auto closed by the system. And that's pretty good for our first year. There are other states that I have talked with that they've had positive response for years, and they don't have numbers quite this high on what is being responded to. So that shows the commitment that our facility owners have in the state to try to continue to improve the damage prevention process as it moves forward. The other area that was addressed in the law was the enforcement. As most of you are aware, up until the time that this was implemented, Alabama's enforcement process was done through the district attorney or the attorney general. And there were some challenges in that the district attorney did not have the manpower with some of the other things that they have to deal with to address damage prevention. They acknowledged it was important, but in their big scheme of their load, they did not have the manpower to follow up on that. In addition, their dollars that were collected went to the state general fund, so there was no financial incentive for them to do that. For the attorney general, again, it was a situation where unless it really was able to be one that there was either a lot of media attention to or there was some major impact to the citizens of Alabama, they just didn't take a priority between other things. So looking through that, it was finally through discussions and review of different processes and programs, the Underground Damage Prevention Authority was established. It is built with an authority board that represents various stakeholders from across the state. There are about 17 individuals who serve on that board. And a lot of 2020 was used to get that board set up, to get operating procedures and the administrative procedures established and filed through the state as part of the requirements of the law, and getting the forms and the reports set up. So we began to receive notifications beginning January of 2021. The authority board has established an executive committee, and that executive committee is charged to do the initial review of the complaints that have been filed. And then those are handled, and any penalty action is taken, referred back to the person who filed the complaint as well as the person who the complaint was filed upon, to let them know that decision. And then there's an appeal process that's set up. There have been 2 executive committee hearings so far in 2021. So January through June, complaints have been filed and reviewed. Alabama's Damage Prevention Authority has a unique aspect in that a penalty could be filed for information only. So in that case, the excavator or the facility owner may initially talk to someone who violated the law and has tried to educate them, but just for documentation purposes, they want it listed. So when those are put in for information only, they do not go to the executive committee. The executive committee only views those that are filed to be processed under the penalty provisions. So for the first 2 quarters of 2021, there have been 21 violations that have been filed for review for the penalty provision. Of those, penalty action has been taken on 17. 4 of those violations were dismissed, where the executive committee found that the information that was provided on the complaint and the response, if there was one given, did not actually violate the law. So 4 of those have been dismissed. Of those 17 penalty actions that have been taken, all of those have been training so far. Was assigned a penalty of both training and monetary penalty. If you look at those 21 that have been filed, 20 of those did report that there was a damage involved to the facility. So we are seeing that a lot of those that are coming in are tied to damages that facility owners, and you'll notice right here that the majority of those have been that. Of the 21 that we've had, 19 of those have been filed by facility owner. We are very interested to see that homeowners have filed. Even when you look at July through August, we've had several that have been filed by homeowners. So homeowners are taking that initiative of letting people know that, hey, somebody is working in my neighborhood or in my yard, and they did not follow the process. Some of those, as again, when you go back and look at what's going on 2020, a lot of homeowners are working from home. They're very dependent on their telecom to maintain their livelihood and their business, and having that loss of internet service or broadband service is very key to those. And all the ones we've had from homeowners so far have been related to loss of internet. You will also note on here that right now we do not have any that have been filed from the excavator for the first 2 quarters, but there have been some filed by excavators, and that will be coming up in the 3rd quarter hearing. So we are continuing to try to educate people on this process, how it works, and following through. When you look at the complaints that have been the violation types, the majority of those have been filed because no notice was given. We are finding that a lot of these are small contractor organizations that are calling in. We haven't had, I think, but one that was really filed from of the first 2 of the first groupings, excuse me, that have been filed in large construction companies, but a lot of them have been smaller contractor groups that have been filed on those. And of those, majority of those were that no notice was given. So even with all the education we continue to do, that still seems to be the biggest hurdle, is being sure that people understand the need to call before you dig and why. There was 5 that were issued because the ticket had expired and they were working on a ticket that had not been updated. There was 1 that was use of mechanized equipment in the tolerance zone, and 2 that were filed stating that it was entered as a false emergency, and did not meet the definition of emergencies. And this again is what the complaint was filed. Now, whether the authority board found that they were right or wrong in that is not captured in this slide, but it's just kind of showing what parts of the law people are reporting as a violation. So that kind of gives you an update relative to what we're seeing from an overall operational changes within the organization, based off of what we're seeing from the legislative changes in some other areas. So I'm going to turn this back over to Matt. I still have no control of my mouse, so I apologize. So Matt, I will just have to forward your slides for you. But so Matt's going to kind of go over some of the operations and technology updates that we've seen over this year as well. that have been a direct impact within the one call contact center operations. So Matt, I will, and you'll just tell me when and I'll forward for you. I'm sorry.
You can go ahead. Next one.
Okay.
So, like Annette said, we've had it's been a bit of a moving target for the past, we'll say, year and a half. The legislative updates and the COVID disruptions, which seem to kind of come in waves now. We had long established patterns. We had a good sense of when the contact center was busy, when the admin side was busy, and that's been completely turned upside down. The law change probably did as much as COVID, but it used to be that Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon were real busy, people getting ready so that it'd be located by the weekend, they could work. All that's been turned over. In addition, we had lots of staff changes within operations. In the contact center, we have a new manager, Jennifer Pickle, and she's done a great job. Gavin left with GIS, and so Andrew, our technician, has really stepped up. And then we've already talked about membership with Emily coming on. The contact center also had, we'll talk about this more, we've also moved to a more formal structure with supervisors to deal with some of the changes. And we've really been making an effort, as I said, with membership to do continuous improvement, to kind of reevaluate very frequently and make changes as needed. So, okay. The main thing with the contact center is we've been trying to stress flexibility and resiliency. So one of the big changes over the past year is we've moved to a lot more part-time agents. We've had the changes in the call pattern. We've expanded our hours. We heard complaints from excavators that they wanted to call at 5:30 and they didn't want to talk to somebody in Tennessee. Tennessee takes our after-hours calls, and at 10 o'clock at night it doesn't matter. But we have some regular volume coming from 6:30 a.m. up until 6:30 p.m. So we started taking calls from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. And so having the 2 full-time supervisors and increasing our part-time agents, they've really done a good job scheduling, and I'll show the results of that later. We've also adjusted our remote work policies. This was primarily for COVID. It was a very formal process. They had to work for a year. They had to meet goals. We still have that in place, but we did want to have the ability, when someone has a family member exposed to COVID, or if they have a mild case of COVID and they can't come to the office, we wanted to be able to get them home quickly. And that required an adjustment to policies, which is very difficult to look at. How do you handle the internet? How do you handle company equipment, and what's expected of agents working at home? So all of that was cleared up. We've kind of changed the way our software, everything's cloud-based. We had done that in anticipation. That worked out well. But in terms of the physical hardware, it's not something you think about. Normally, 5 years ago, the majority of our equipment was workstations in cubicles in the office, and now it's primarily laptops. And even to the point of, this is a very recent idea with the Delta wave, we've have dedicated grab-and-go computer kits. This is what that looks like. We've flat packed laptop, all the cords, mouse, everything that's needed, and then bubble wrap to monitor with a kind of an easily detachable stand, and have them ready to go. We have 3 of these kits, and we're actually sending 2 out this morning, like as we're talking right now. This is something we would have never even considered 2 years ago, but this is how you have to operate with COVID. And generally what happens is either agents express a concern and we send them home in advance, or realistically, a lot of what happens is they call in, somebody in the family is exposed, I can't come in, and so I'll grab one of these boxes and go deliver it to their houses, or somebody else on the staff will go deliver it, set it on their porch, and it's kind of a contactless delivery of a workstation, and they can be up and working for their shift that day. Okay. So when COVID first started coming in and we saw the patterns really being disrupted, we really sat down and tried to find a way to measure the impact on our schedule. How do we adjust our schedule quickly? And what we did is we took our scheduling application and we compared it to the voice calls that come in, the remote calls, and then the total calls per agent to kind of get a sense of how are we allocating our people? How can we take, it was originally full-time, and as we increase part-time, how can we be more responsive to patterns that change month to month? And so if you look at May 2020, top line is our total load per agent. There's a really hot spot in the afternoon, a little bit at lunchtime and a little bit at the morning. And if we go over time, as we started adjusting this from May 2020 through September, this was our first kind of pass at it. And we, you know, it looks like we've cooled it off a lot. We still had a couple of little hot spots on certain days in the afternoon, but it generally started smoothing out. And as the supervisors got used to this, and as we brought on more part-time staff and we had some full-time people retire, if you go on to the next one, now it starts to get even cooler. Still had some troubles in the afternoon here, and still a little bit of trouble with the voice. If we go on to the next one, June 2021, you can see this keeps improving, even though June 2021 was our all-time record. It was the highest request month on history. So, and by this point, we've gotten it pretty smoothed out. And then the latest one from August, we feel like this is pretty smoothed out. It's there's a big hotspot in the morning that we're looking at if we need to address it or not. That's remote tickets that come in overnight. So the Tennessee agents don't process those, and we don't ask our agents that are working from 5 to 7 because they're kind of a skeleton crew. They generally don't take a lot of tickets, but we don't want them tied up on something because there's not a lot of them, and there can be sudden spikes. So there is a backlog waiting in the morning that gets processed right at 6 a.m. Now, hiring part-time agents over the past year has been difficult. I mean, we've probably all seen it where you try to stop in at like a fast food restaurant and the dining room is closed because they can't hire right now. And a lot of times that's where we're competing. We've hired 10 over the past year. We're not holding 10, but we've hired 10 part-time agents. In order to hire 10, we had to review 1,215 resumes. And out of those resumes, we sent 190 requests for interviews. Out of 190, only 61 followed up and scheduled the interview. And of those 61, less than 50%, only 30 actually showed up for the interview. And of the 10, I don't have the numbers, but you know, of those 30, they have to pass the typing test and the whole interview schedule. So it takes a lot of work. You can hire right now, but it takes an extreme amount of effort to do that. And they've done a great job. Our contact center team has really done a great job through all of this. Okay, the next one. Gis and Technology. This is one where we had, like I said, our GIS manager left at the end of 2020, and Andrew, our GIS technician, has really stepped into his role, and we've been able to work. We had a real concern with membership because GIS is a large part of the membership onboarding process. Since we don't require GIS data, we very much are willing to meet potential members where they are, whatever they have. And that's on top of the existing members submit regular updates. And Andrew is really focused on automating those, the notification area update automation. for two reasons. It frees up his time and it reduces the chance for human error. So once it's automated and it's tested and proven to be correct, that's one less thing we have to think about for each member. He's increased his coordination with Emily. They work together very closely. They've got a very clean process where they're not having to email and ask for favors or anything. They just put it on the board, move the cards over, it gets taken care of. And then base map improvements, we constantly have to focus on our base maps. We can't rely on commercial sources because a large portion of our locate requests come in areas that haven't been mapped yet. So we're having to work to identify those areas. In a lot of cases, physically visit them, drive the streets, record the names, get them in our map, and kind of hold on to them until we get an update from the authoritative source that has that included, which can be years. And if we'll jump to the next one, I'll kind of show you one of the things Andrew's been doing. There's about 730,000 street segments in the state of Alabama, and trying to map out where to find those can be difficult. If you just plot ticket volume, it'll tend to just trend with population. And so what we've looked at is areas where we have high total talk time. So this is painful for our agents. We're trying to keep from hiring more agents than we already have. And so we'll look at areas that are higher than average, where the ticket time takes higher than normal, so more than 2 minutes and 30 seconds to process, and then take those and combine them with the total number of tickets to see what are the highest talk times, which square miles take the most time for agents to process tickets. And he kind of really focuses there. Generally, that's an indication that there's something new that we don't have on a map. A long ticket generally means they search the map. That's where they get hung up. And so if you see, this is that was where the high talk time areas were. This is where streets were updated through the year. Andrew and our GIS intern, Seth, worked. We try to find online sources, and in a lot of cases, especially up around the Madison, Limestone, Jefferson, Shelby line, East Montgomery, and Auburn, they will actually go visit sites there and collect the street names and the rough outline of the streets to help speed the tickets up. So, like I said, it's about 8,500 street updates throughout the course of last year. And for the technology update, the bulk of our focus is on updating our GeoCall software. And that update is installed internally. We're actively testing. We're hoping to start testing with select users within the month, probably. And there's several things in there that'll be interesting. The primary one that we're going to test first is there's a member notification area map editor, and that will allow members to log in, view their current area, download it, download the published version. So we don't put things in place live. We do published versions, so we can go back and track any given ticket, which version of the member notification areas it was compared against. It allows interactive editing and uploading of files directly, and we'll do some basic geoprocessing. So, for example, if you upload lines, it will buffer them and dissolve it for you. It's mobile friendly. People like our mobile app, but it's very difficult to maintain. So we're going to consolidate that down into a mobile friendly website that'll scale down to an iPad, to an iPhone, whatever users are using. It also has increased flexibility, so we'll be able to do some more advanced integrations. We've had a lot of requests from members for interacting into our system and out of our system, and it has a much improved GIS search and display with customized auto suggest and things like that. And Annette, I think there's a couple of examples of that. This is kind of a view of the new ticket, and anybody that's familiar with our existing ticket can tell this is a big departure. It's much more focused on the map. It's map first. You search the map. If it finds a result, it pulls back the information for you, so you're not having to do the opposite. You're not having to type everything in and then try to search the map and then go back and adjust the results. It's very much map first, and it splits the ticket into two sections, a mapping section and then a locate info section. And if you'll jump to the next slide, this is the notification area editor with just a little test service area around our office showing a green area drawn in manually. Like I said, it's a very simple interface, but it does allow members to do a lot, notably seeing it, downloading it, uploading files. And it keeps a history for audit trails. We get a lot of questions. When's the last time we updated? This will answer that question for members automatically. So, and that's what we've been working on in the operations department.
Thanks, Matt. As you can tell, they stay very, very busy. I don't think that's one of the things that's unique about this industry is you very seldom have 2 days that are the same. And you may come in with the best intention that this is going to be your focus for the day, and something comes up and it totally changes for you. And so I think you can see the dynamics that go on within the operational side of the organization daily, and Matt and his team do an excellent job of maintaining that and helping to ensure that we continue to provide good quality service, not only to our members, but to the excavating community and the general public as well. And those numbers, what you see with the increase of call volume and how those call trends come in and what goes on within the locate volume, is a lot of times a direct result of what we're doing on the public and awareness and education side to ensure that people are aware of the law and they know what the law requires, but not only just what the law requires, but what is smart damage prevention efforts and why it's important to be a part of the process and be an advocate for damage prevention. So McKay and his crew, which, you know, sometimes changes on who his crew is, but they do a great job of trying to keep up with both of the demand that we have within the educational world of where people would like to have us speak. They've done a great job of getting into some new avenues to look at where our target markets are, who do we need to contact, what are some organizations that we can partner with. And so with that, I'll turn it over and let McKay just kind of give you an idea of some of the things that have gone on in the last year during the public awareness and education programs.
Okay, so yeah, I'll just I'm going to be pretty brief, but just kind of you know, we kind of started off. A couple of things happened earlier this year. Hayes actually took another position, so we're down a person in that avenue. So many of you knew who he was, and so he kind of took on a lot of responsibilities as well. So we lost Hayes, and then in addition to that, we kind of started off fairly well in 2021 looked pretty good, and then we kind of got thrown a curveball a little bit, and numbers started spiking, and so things ended up changing again. So we can go to the next slide. So just to kind of give you an idea, the goal is you know, we try to hit as many different associations. The thing that I always kind of say is that basically you have to kind of think there's not really necessarily a unifying body amongst all the underground utilities, and that's where we kind of end up coming in and filling that role a lot of times, or at least kind of helping facilitate that and set that up. So we pretty much could be at a different meeting or a different association meeting every day of the week for the most part, and so we've got a lot of the ones that we try to attend on a pretty regular basis. And so we were able to even during this COVID year again take advantage and kind of be at as many of them. We still had a lot of events that were kind of on cancel, still on hold, but we did make a fairly good amount of them. There's always kind of some good benefit to kind of having some face-to-face interaction, having a lot of side conversations that go on to kind of get some different ideas out there and to kind of help share some stuff. And so we were able to do a lot. A few of the ones that we kind of filled in with, which was nice, is in Talladega this year, we were trying to come up with some creative ideas. We were supposed to do a STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics program for all the school-age children. Well, obviously, school-age children didn't take field trips last year. So then Talladega had to get creative, and we had to kind of do some other things there. Long story short, what we ended up doing with that, which is just and we got a good deal on it, is we now have we're not going to run it for the October race, but the previous two races we've had a 25 by 50 foot 20 and I said that correctly, 25 by 50 foot 811 logo that anytime you see an overhead imagery when you're watching the race online or whatever else, you should be able to pretty easily see it. So just kind of working some things that we haven't really done in the past just to kind of figure out other avenues. Home and Garden Show, it's going to kick back up in 2022. Just got off the phone with them 2 days ago. So that's going to happen again. Rural Electric Association got hit right in the middle of all of it, decided to cancel. Vegetation Management is another big conference, 600-700 different public works and Department of Transportation crews. So we lost some, but we were able to kind of maintain, and we're able to still have some. And that's even kind of in the time of losing Hayes. Well, I forget when Hayes left us. I think it was about May of this year. Wasn't too long ago. So we can go to the next slide. So a few things that kind of working on from the damage prevention aspect and just some of the public awareness is one of the things that Alabama 811 has been deemed kind of the enforcement training avenue for the enforcement process and through the authority. So we kind of came up and kind of worked on developing. We started on it last year and then kind of really kind of got back into it, and I kind of finished it up. So working on that enforcement training. That is actually active now. I'm starting to receive some pretty regular correspondence. They have to reach out to myself, make contact with me. They have to register for the webinar, and then we kind of schedule it. So what I'm doing is we just kind of had to come up with some kind of a process. And so right now what we're doing is we're going to set a couple of dates a month. They'll have an opportunity to kind of register for those. And then, of course, a certificate of participation will basically be issued out. We've got a good enforcement training out. We're not going to use this as an opportunity to bore them to death. We're going to try to provide them a really good kind of education training that touches on pretty much any and every aspect. One of the things that I do try to do is we have had in the past couple of years, I've tried to make it an emphasis to really, with as many conferences and trade shows that we do, try to also acquire a speaking opportunity at a lot of them. And I think that's kind of really paid off. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was able to speak in front of several hundred at Department of Transportation conference. I'll be speaking in a couple of weeks at the Electric Cities conference. So trying to, get on there, kind of have an opportunity to kind of be in front of them and present kind of makes it a twofold and is a little bit more effective. But the training presentation, one of the things that I do depending on the group, one thing that I kind of say is I don't necessarily have a generic presentation for each and every group. I try to customize, which means taking stuff out, adding stuff in. I try to really customize whatever the education presentation is to whatever group I'm speaking with. That way it makes it a little bit more effective, a little bit more worthwhile. So I've really kind of do that in the past couple of years as well. So we can go to the next slide. So actually, in just a second, I've got a question I will address because I think I'm going to make somebody pretty happy here. But one of the things also as well is as you know, part of one of my roles and responsibilities is to kind of help really manage and coordinate the APAC program. So the decision was made pretty early this year to go ahead and remain with the virtual webinars. As many of you know, and if you don't know, for the past 15 years, what we've done is actually help coordinate the APAC program, which is a public awareness program for about 70 plus gas and pipeline operators in the state. So we usually, we pretty much handle it start to finish as much as we do. The only thing that the pipeline operators are responsible for is your contact with your residents that live along your right of way and your customers. And when it comes to RP 1162 and public awareness, we pretty much cover everything else. So trying to come up with some kind of a plan. What we did is in 2020, we came up with a good game plan where basically you'll see a couple of snippets here on the screen of the booklet that we sent out. In previous years, we had not done this. And so there was kind of some benefits to the way that we're doing it now. In previous years, we only sent an invitation out, and the only way you got any of that educational and baseline messaging is if you attended the meeting. Now, since we switched gears, it kind of forced us, and I think we're going to continue doing this even in subsequent years where COVID is not as much of an effect, is from now on, we're going to send that mailed booklet, which actually covers all the baseline messaging and messages out to each and every one. So it's not going to be just an invitation from this point forward. So even when we go back to face-to-face meetings like we've done in years past, I think the booklet is effective because now you've got all those mailings, and we sent out 26,000 plus of the booklet that covered all the baseline messaging. So really, regardless of whether they attended the meeting or not, you're getting more content, you're getting more information in their hands. The webinars really truly just kind of serve as a supplemental. So we did webinars this year to kind of help to touch on that. What I think we're going to do as well is there's a kind of some good things that have come out with the APAC program that COVID kind of forced. Was number one, the booklet and the information. So it's going to get out to more people. Also, too, I think even when we go back to face-to-face meetings, conducting the webinars and offering some webinars afterwards for people that might either not feel safe still and or just did not get an opportunity to do that one scheduled time. So we only do one face-to-face meeting per zone. The webinars, we offered 12 different times over a 2-week span. So this will at least give them an opportunity to get that education effort as well. So we're going to continue to do the webinars even if and when we're able to go back to face-to-face meetings next year. So there's kind of a benefit on that. We'll go to the next slide. So one of the questions that popped up was, have you ever thought about advertising 811 on the Nextdoor app? So this is an app used by neighborhoods and homeowners that can be sent out based on zip codes. So Alan Meyer asked that question. So I appreciate the question because this is my slide that says, yes, we actually, I had been on several webinars over the past couple of years and listened to some of the other 811 centers kind of mention that they had been advertising on the 811 app or on the Nextdoor app. And just to give you a brief explanation of what Nextdoor is, this is probably going to be, and this is continuing, we're seeing it by the numbers, this is an ever increasing neighborhood communication style app. So even if you don't want to do the Facebook where there's comments and political, this is basically an informational only type app or situation. And so Nextdoor has grown in popularity. I'll explain that and I'll show you a little bit more of that in just a second. But it's a great way to provide a communication tool out. So what we did is I started kind of calling around, myself and Hayes kind of started working on it. And what we basically found out is that several states were using it from an advertising aspect. What was brought to us and what we ended up doing, which is different than the other states, and we can go ahead and go to the next slide too, that'll be fine. So believe it or not, we were very aware of Nextdoor, very aware of how to use it. And what we ended up doing is actually signing up, and we were the first 811 center in the country to sign up for the Nextdoor app as an agency. So what the benefits of an agency? There's a couple of benefits. It's not paid advertising per se. You pay a set rate, but what you have an unlimited amount of posting or ability to post. The neat thing about Nextdoor is in Alabama, for example, when we started the Nextdoor, it was under 600,000. That was just earlier this year. The numbers have grown to 660,000 verified members in the state. So that climbs, and it climbs on a regular basis. There's no additional pay that we have to pay per that. But long story short, what kind of ends up happening with the Nextdoor app is us set up as an agency allows us a lot more flexibility and ability. And with this, it's verified addresses, it's verified people and E911 addresses. In addition to that, so these people sign up for it. You don't have to go out and market and try to advertise. You get these set numbers. It's a great tool. It's a great benefit. But like I said, we started as the first 811 center in the country earlier this year to come on as an agency. And then basically from there, there's actually been a few more states that have come on board, including Georgia and some more. And there's other states that continue just to do some advertising efforts. But just because you can kind of see in the background here, I put 3 of the posts that we've done. But we've got a huge amount of impressions that ends up coming off that. So some of these posts, for example, the first one on the left, 53,000 impressions, 61,000, another 50-something thousand impressions, or another 63,000. So trying to put some pertinent messaging, trying to put some of that messaging on, and really what our goal with the Nextdoor agency app is. And believe it or not, I've received messages and text messages from friends going, hey, I saw your name. I see where you're advertising it on. It's really cool to see Alabama 811 on the Nextdoor app. So there's some real cool benefits to that. But what's really neat about it is with the unlimited posting, we're able to provide a lot of cool information on there. But it also, if you notice at the bottom, we've got several comments. And so it allows for a lot of interactivity. The goal is to try to reach some of those grassroots efforts and try to reach some of those markets that are a little bit more difficult to reach. And so the goal is here, the messaging is much more targeted towards homeowners, much more targeted toward weekend warriors, but also trying to target the message a lot of times as well towards to help them kind of help police things and be aware of if you don't see markings and there's an excavator working in front of your property, is that a good thing? And trying to market the message that way as well. And so it's been working. I've kind of set out October, and I've got a good series of posts coming out, and I'm trying to get it a little bit more consistent with that. With the loss of haze, we've had some different things that have kind of, things have been not quite as active in some ways, but I've kind of got a good set mapped out here for the future on this. And so next door, if you haven't signed up for it, I would highly suggest it. But these messages go out via a text, via a push notification, via an email, and then if they actually access the app. So a lot of publicity that we're able to get, and a good way to kind of get that targeted message out there as well. So we've targeted discussing the homeowner app, we've targeted discussing just the color codes, etc. So we can go towards the next slide.
Which is me.
Well, and the only other thing I was going to say, I'm sorry, you're right. I didn't include the last slide, but what we have noticed as well, the last little thing I'll mention is just we're trying to do a couple of little educational efforts, find some different ways, find some different avenues. And the other thing that we've been tracking a little bit is we've really kind of seen an uptick in materials requests. So a lot of groups, it seems to kind of be providing, and I've noticed this, is we're getting a lot of folks that are providing a little bit more in-house training, I guess you would say, and trying to still continue their education, because just because public meetings, just because meetings have stopped, does not mean that work obviously stopped, as you can see by the numbers. And so education, safety, that all still has to be pushed. But we've provided a lot of excavation manuals out this year, a lot of the brochures, color code cards, and so we're kind of continuing to track that. So anytime any of your groups and organizations need any of those materials, just keep in mind we're always happy to kind of provide those to you. But that's all I've got.
Okay. And you can tell from some of the comments that have been made, both from the educational side and the operational side, there are some key areas that we will continue to look at as we move forward, as well as addressing unique things that come up during the year for either our utility member needs, the excavator needs, and so forth. So it's never a crystal ball in what we're doing. It's always just trying to look at what the trends of the industry are, get the feedback from our participants and stakeholders in our state, and how to continue to improve the program as we go forward every year. Just as a reminder, and of course it's a little bit of a short notice, but we are having our Underground Damage Prevention Summit next week, which is hosted by the ADPA, and we won't be doing the Locate Rodeo this year, but we will do doing the summit. So a lot of the things that we've talked about today on some of the areas to get the feedback, that's an avenue that we use that. So I know we're getting close on time. I'm going to ask McKay, because again, I can't expand my control panel, so I can't see if there's any questions that have been asked, but I'll ask McKay if there's any questions that we need to address.
We've got no additional questions at this time.
Okay. All right. If not, then here's the contact for myself, McKay, and Matt. If you have any additional questions you think of later, or information that you want, feel free to contact us, and we will follow up on that. As always, every year, I told somebody the other day, I think every year, next year's going to be an easier year, and every year it proves me wrong. So I'm not going to say that for next year, but we are very fortunate. For Alabama 811, I have a great staff who are very dedicated and hardworking. We have great commitments from both our board, who represents our principal and general members, our members themselves, our supporting members, and we have a great interaction within the excavation community, working with some of the excavation and utility contractor groups within the state. So it's not a island of our own over here. Damage prevention is a shared responsibility, and having dedicated people that are involved in it and concerned about both the safety of the facilities and the safety of those who live around and work around those facilities is key and important. So with that, I appreciate very much your attendance today. And again, this will be posted later if you want to have other people view it, or if you need to go back and verify some of that information. So it will be posted on our website, both as the PDF of the slides that you can download, as well as the live presentation. So with that, McKay, is there any other questions that came in?
I do not see any.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, we will dismiss the annual membership meeting for this year and adjourn that meeting. And we look forward to working with you again in the coming year. Thank you.